What is up, Flick Connection? Welcome to episode 2 of Flick Connection Uncut, the show where I basically just talk for, I don't know, we'll go 30 minutes, an hour. Essentially, this is also going to be my very first podcast. You can check that out. I'll put links in the description, all of that. But essentially what we're going to do, similar to what we did on the first episode, is I'm going to give you my picks of the week. I got 10 different movies I'm recommending from various streaming services. We're going to talk about some channel-related things that I think are pretty interesting. We're going to talk about kind of some things that happened last week. And we're going to talk about Deadpool comes out this week. So we're going to talk a little bit about Deadpool and specifically kind of why the first one works so well and kind of why that franchise is as successful as it is. I will say on my first episode last week, I made a couple of comments throughout. You notice I was drinking water a good bit. You may have even noticed my voice sounded a little bit off. I was really kind of struggling. It was my first time just sort of going uncut and talking to the camera for, I did a little over 30 minutes. I woke up the next morning with a horrible sore throat. I was basically on the verge of getting sick, and that's why I was drinking a lot, and I may still have an occasional cough on this episode. I'll be sure to kind of turn away from the mic, but sick this week. It was a rough week. I missed a day of work, and I should have rested more than I did, but last week was my first week of putting out 5 different videos, one every single weekday. And I used the day off to sort of help catch up on that because that was rough. That's going to be really difficult. I am going to try to stick with it, particularly if it helps the YouTube channel grow. If you're listening to this on a podcast, again, this is like the very first podcast, so bear with me. We're going to talk a lot about movies. You're going to walk away with some really good movie recommendations, but definitely check out the YouTube channel. That's where I make a ton of movie recommendations. I'm going to make more this week than I will on this particular episode, but you'll get some good ones out of this episode. If you're watching me right now, you'll notice I look a little different than I have recently. Number one, lost the specs, finally got contacts. It's such a pain when you run out of contacts. You've got to go you schedule the eye appointment. You got to go to the doctor essentially to get contacts. You can't just order them. For a while, I was actually getting them from the UK, and they were just so slow in delivering them, and I just wasn't happy with that. So I finally made the doctor's appointment. Went. Obviously, my prescription had not changed, so it's just a big pain in the ass. But another thing having contacts allows me to do is get a haircut, and by get a haircut, I mean I cut my own hair, and I can't really do that with glasses. It interferes, and I'm so blind with them that I cannot use the shears. So I finally got all spiffed up. And you can probably tell I got a lot more silver in there than you probably realized. It always sort of lights up when I trim it up short like this. So let me know, you like the shorter hair? Do you like it a little bit longer? I can never decide. That's why I ask your opinion. I like it this way. I also like it a little bit longer. I can comb it back. I notice it thins out on me. When I have it longer, I think it comes out more, like in washing and grooming. I get more strands, and it sort of over time starts to get thinner. So as I'm getting older, I probably need to stick with the shorter haircut. Plus, it's low maintenance, and I do not have time to be grooming my hair in the morning. So that's basically kind of what's been going on. That's what went on last week. Something I want to involve my listeners in before we get to the picks of the week is my last name. If you've been following the channel for a while, you know I only go by Darren. I don't share my last name for one reason, and that's just security. I don't want to make it easy to find out who I am. So basically, I'm in the process of trying to figure out what my last name is going to be because Darren by itself is not enough of an identity. I've got a short list of ones that I like. Essentially what I want, if you have an opinion and you think you have a good last name that would go with Darren, let me know in the comments below. I'll read it. I'll take it into consideration. What I'm going to do is I'm going to narrow it down to my top 2. When I can't decide between 2, I'm gonna take a poll from my Patreon supporters. They are gonna vote, and they will determine what my name will be. My wife thought it was odd that I was gonna do this on the channel, but I want to involve you guys. Now, if I had like 100,000 followers on YouTube, I probably wouldn't do this. But everyone watching this is ground level. This is my first year, so I want to involve you. You get to kind of, I'll pull back the curtain a little bit. You get to know the name that I'm going to go with is not going to be real. It's probably not going to really sound real, but that's fine. But I think I need more of an identity online as I'm trying to recruit other people to join the show, or at least be on the show as guests, is what I mean. I can't just be going by Darren and have this like secretive last name. So that's really the reason for it. So that's kind of the next step. I hope to have one soon. I've got a couple that I like. I'm not going to share those. I'm just going to pick it and go with the two with the Patreon supporters. If you want to support me on Patreon, you can do that. I'll put a link in the description below. But that said, let's talk about the picks of the week. Now, I actually got to watch more movies this week than I normally do with being sick, so I'm going to talk about, in addition to my recommendations, my picks of the week, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I watched, the good and the bad, just briefly kind of tell you. You'll pick up some extra recommendations out of that. And then later this week, I'll have my regular Netflix recommendations. And then on Friday, I've got kind of a special episode that's going to recommend some cool movies that I recommend you watch across various streaming services. So you'll get some good recommendations there. So this week is going to be packed full of recommendations. Starting with Netflix, I watched Beyond Skyline this past week. Now, I really liked it to a degree. Now, what I will say about this movie is if you watch it and you don't know certain things about it, you're going to go, what is Darren doing? Why is he recommending this garbage? Because it does look like a real low-budget movie. The cool thing about it is an extremely low-budget movie, and they managed to make it look way bigger and more expensive than it is just by developing new techniques. It's essentially created by a guy that does a lot of special effects works for big movies like the Avengers and stuff. This is like a passion project. You may remember several years ago there was one called Skyline. It took place in like a condo, a high-rise condo, and there's these aliens with this blue light, and they're abducting people, and then they got little sentinels that kind of come in, and they're clearing out all the buildings. Kind of a cool movie. It basically climaxes with one of the main characters getting into the spaceship, and it's this huge thing, and there's these big aliens in there, and it just looks like, oh my god, there's going to be like an epic sequel to this. Beyond Skyline is the epic sequel, except it's completely different characters. Frank Grillo's in it. He's really cool. The thing that's cool about this movie is that it's like non-stop. It's just really, once it gets going, it's just action, and it just keeps going, and they're constantly on like a new set. In no way did I feel like they were trying to stretch anything out. There's not really lengthy dialogue scenes that really just sort of stretch it out to a feature length. The movie is just packed. And I'll say, this is not really my type of movie. It feels almost like a made-for-TV Sci-Fi Channel movie, but just like up to another level. So for that, I really appreciated it. And even at the end, they do some bloopers, and you get to see some of the, you get to see how the sauce is made. They show really kind of how many effects are in it. So I thought that was cool, because that's really what this movie is about. It's a display of what can be done on a very low budget if you know what you're doing. So I thought that was cool. My other one for Netflix, actually, this is the first one I'm recommending publicly that came from the community recommendations, and that is Shimmer Lake. Now, this is a Netflix original, and it's a murder mystery, kind of has a Fargo type vibe. It's not nearly as good as Fargo, but if you love Fargo, you're gonna like this movie. It's got one of those types of things. One of the cool things about it is most of the cast is comedic actors. Rainn Wilson, Dwight from The Office is in it. They just kind of kept coming. There's several guys you're gonna go, oh man, you feel like it's gonna be a comedy at some point, and it's not. It's got some levity, there's some good lines in it, but it's just a nice little mystery movie, and the cool thing about it is it plays in reverse order. Not really like Memento, where every single scene is in reverse order. This one is every day is in reverse order. And yeah, that sounds like a gimmick, but it's done in this movie it serves the story really well for you to start to kind of get information backwards, and then you suddenly see what started this whole crazy thing. So I thought that was really good. I highly recommend checking that one out. So those are my 2 Netflix picks. For Amazon, I recommend watching Angel Heart. Now, this is from 1987. A lot of you have probably seen it. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. The reason it's on the list is because I have seen it on streaming services before, but it's rarely available on streaming. I've kind of had an urge to watch this movie several times over the past 10 years, and I'll look and I never find it. Now that it's on there, I'll be watching it this week. But this is Mickey Rourke and Robert De Niro. Like I said, it's 1987, so it's Mickey Rourke before he disappeared. And it's a cool kind of film noir. It's a dark detective story. It's kind of got... it kind of revolves around the occult. There's a, excuse me, there's a big twist in it, and I don't want to give that away here, but it's dark, it's moody, it's got that, I want to say 90s vibe because it's in the late 80s and it does feel a little more like early 90s, but I recommend it. It's something I've really enjoyed. It's the twist is what makes this movie, but I recommend that one. And then to go really dark, there's a movie called Eaten Alive that I had never seen. Now, I watched this on my sick day. Quentin Tarantino was definitely influenced by this movie and took from this movie. If you remember in Kill Bill, when she's in the coma and the male nurse says, "My name is Buck and I'm here to fuck," that is not only from this movie, it's the opening line of Eaten Alive, and it's said by Robert Englund, who, that name sounds familiar, he's Freddy Krueger. Now, this is a very young Robert Englund. He's like number 9 on the credit list. He's nobody, but basically it's about this hotel in the South. I can't remember if they ever say it's in Texas or something, and it's run by this crazy old man that essentially just kind of, as far as I could tell, he just sort of snaps, loses his shit, and just murders a guest whenever he wants. He doesn't seem to have control of it. I'm wrong, as the movie goes on, you start to hear not voices, but there's something kind of messing with his head. And then the thing is, he's got this giant crocodile in a pen right off the porch of this hotel, and he's feeding the bodies to the crocodile. Crazy looking. It's got this really cool kind of grindhouse vibe. For some reason, all the women in the beginning are wearing these curly headed wigs. I don't know what that's about, but so they look kind of weird. But the sets, it looks like a set, but it looks nice. It looks like something in a Quentin Tarantino movie. It looks like he directly ripped it off. It's cool in that respect. So if you want to watch something that looks like Rob Zombie maybe directed it, is maybe a better way to say it, check out Eaten Alive. I recommend it if you're into gory horror movies. It'll probably be on an upcoming list of gory horror movies that you can watch online. So that'll be coming up. Those are my 2 Amazon picks. For Hulu, there's not a lot to pick from on Hulu, but some of the best of the best. I'm recommending Sicario because the sequel is coming out just in a few weeks, so it's a great time to watch that movie. I loved it. Same director as Blade Runner 2049, and I always forget the tense on it. It's not Arrival. I can't remember if it's it's not The Arrival, it's not Arrivals, Arrival. Same director as those movies, great director, really well put together. So highly recommend rewatching Sicario. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it, which is why it's so easily available on Hulu, but it is one of the better movies on there right now. And then Hunt for the Wilderpeople. I've recommended it on the channel before. It's a lot of fun. Same director as Thor Ragnarok, so it's got a really good sense of humor. He also did What We Do in the Shadows. If you haven't seen that, I recommend that. This is a nice little story about an adopted kid that runs off into the brush in New Zealand. So it's beautiful, but it's kind of an adventure story, and it's fun, and it's PG-13, so the family can watch this one together. I really enjoyed the heck out of this. The reason it makes my recommendations this list, and it's not just totally random, is the kid that plays Ricky Baker. Really funny kid. Big, real heavy set kid, but really funny for a teenager. Good comedic timing. He is got a major role in the new Deadpool movie, which comes out later this week. So that makes that movie perfect to watch this week. Again, you can kind of hear my voice starting to go already. If you're listening on the podcast, I promise I don't always sound this hoarse. It will get better. I'm just kind of getting over something, but I'm going to muscle through and knock this one out. HBO. Not a lot there either, but I put Aliens on my list for recommendations this week. That's another one that's not always easy to find, and I've got a couple of people in mind for this, but I plan on having a debate over which is better, Alien or Aliens. I think it's easy to have a debate. I go back and forth. I tend to settle on Aliens only because it's just there's so much more going on in it. Even though Alien probably is the better movie. Let me know in the comments below. I kind of want to feel that out. How do you guys feel about Alien versus Aliens? I love James Cameron's sequels. Terminator 2, I mean, he's just really killer at that. At taking something that was successful and just improving upon it and not breaking it down. We definitely need more of that. Get Out is on HBO. I recommend that. Hopefully anybody interested in that has seen it by now. The reason that makes this week's list is because Jordan Peele's new movie has just recently been announced, so it's a good time to watch Get Out. I will talk a little bit more in this episode about his new movie and some details on that. But that's it for streaming recommendations. My pick of the week for a rental is going to be Black Panther. It's the only thing releasing this week. It's one of the biggest movies of the year so far, if not the biggest. Well, no, it's not the biggest so far because Infinity War came out. It's the biggest. I'm not a big superhero guy. That's not true. I love my Batman, love my Christopher Nolan Batman. I love select ones, but I'm not real big into the MCU. But this is a great one. It's going to be the best movie of the week for sure by rental. There's no contest there. Normally this will be a little bit more difficult for me to decide. Not today. You can rent Black Panther if you're listening to this on Tuesday in the edited version. You can rent it today. And then pick of the week for theaters is Deadpool 2. There's really no contest there. Another easy pick. I don't always go with just the biggest, baddest. Again, if this is the first time listening on the podcast, I don't always pick the biggest, baddest thing. Last week I recommended Revenge, which is a very small movie, which you can actually rent. I think it's $5.99. on Amazon or other streaming services if you use Google Play or iTunes. So you can check that one out at home if you want, especially if it's not in the theaters near you. So I don't just pick the basic stuff, but man, Deadpool is just so good. We're going to talk about what makes that movie so good coming up. But those are my picks of the week. Hopefully you like that. Everyone seemed to really like that format. This is a new format for me. It allows me to recommend some things I wouldn't otherwise be able to recommend. So I think that's really cool. I'm happy with that format. I think I'm going to stick with it. I think I'm going to stick with this uncut version where this is the beginning. It just feels right. You're watching it. I'm getting a lot of thumbs up. So we'll keep doing that. As far as news, we're going to talk a little bit about news. And I'm really only going to cover movie news when there's anything that I think is fairly relevant to talk about. That's not always the case. Right now, all the movie news revolves around the Cannes Film Festival and Marvel movies. If you go to imdb.com right now and you go by popular movies, the first 10, 8 of them are Marvel movies. It's crazy. I know those movies are popular, but good God, we're in a drought of good movies right now. There was the A Quiet Place, which was good, that came out recently, and then it's just like it's Marvel movies. That's all that are. I mean, because even though Deadpool's not in the MCU, it is Marvel based, so they're dominating, which I think is a shame. We should be getting some original stuff, but we're going to talk a little bit about that because that's sort of making the news here. Jordan Peele. He's announced his new movie. It's called Us. It'll be out in March of 2019. And it's unclear as to whether it revolves around... It revolves around two couples. It's unclear if they're two couples of different races, white and black, or they're two interracial couples. But Elizabeth Moss from The Handmaid's Tale is supposedly going to star, along with Lupita Nyong'o. I think I'm saying that right. She was in the Black Panther. I think she got her start in, not her start, but her big break in 12 Years a Slave. She's great. There's not a lot of details about it. He's tweeted about it. The cool thing about Jordan Peele, and I've said this on the channel before, is because Get Out was such a box office success. So it was successful and just that he put together a good movie, and it was successful at the box office. And because of that big box office success where it made, I don't know, like 20 times its budget, it made so much more than its budget. I said this, he's going to be able to do whatever he wants to do, not at any budget, but at a big budget. They're just going to give him money and say, do what you want to do. That is very rare, particularly for someone that has only made one film. Christopher Nolan is one of the few people that gets to do that. And when I say that, I mean gets to work on an original idea with a big budget with no studio interference. Very, very rare. So kudos to him. The cool thing about Jordan Peele for me is that he seems to understand movies really well. He's got a good feel on particularly like sort of like 80s and 90s culture. You got that from watching his show and his skits. You know, he had the really funny bit about the Gremlins 2 that I just love, and a bunch of others, but you know, he seems to really kind of understand what makes movies good, what makes them and what makes them not good based on some of his comedy. And I think his brain is able to sort of develop something that just works well and is really well and balanced. So, I mean, I'm not going to just be eagerly awaiting Us, but I would expect it to be good. I mean, it doesn't even have to be as good as Get Out for it to be a big success. So I'll be looking forward to that. As far as another popular filmmaker that gets to do original stuff, Quentin Tarantino, his next movie is called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's going to star, as long as none of them bail, which can happen if the wheels don't get rolling soon with these actors. It's going to star DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, Burt Reynolds, Tim Roth, Kurt Russell, Michael Madsen, and apparently Timothy Olyphant. Is that how you say it? The guy from, God, he's had a ton of shows. Justified. I really like him. He's always good on screen, but apparently he's going to be in it. And it's supposed to take place in 1969, LA, multiple stories, kind of like Pulp Fiction, but it's supposed to sort of like all build up to the Manson family murdering Sharon Tate. So that sounds really interesting. I'm sure it'll be good. Even if it's his worst movie, it's still going to be pretty good. So that'll be worth looking forward to. All right, and just coming back from an unscheduled break, battery issues. Something with this camera. I'll start filming, it looks like the battery's full, and then it's not. So, my fault for not charging it ahead of time, but it looked like it was full. So, we got a little bit of a charge. We're going to finish the show. Basically, what I was getting ready to say was I'm in contact with someone that does stunt driving for films here in Atlanta. Hopefully we can get something going. I'm not sure what that's going to entail. If it's going to just be an interview where me and him sit here and we talk about his job, whether or not he takes me kind of on a ride along, or whether or not we can actually film him showing me how to do something like a J-turn or something. So we'll see. I'm excited about that. We talked a little bit. We're going to talk this week, see if we can get something going over the next couple of weeks. I've also got a connection for a movie with some fairly big actors being filmed very, very locally here, so I may be able to get some sort of connection there with a person I know. So starting to get some things like that. Those are the types of things I want to do. Like I said on the last episode, I'm not going to be looking to get like big name actors on a little show like this. Plus, they can't really share much information about their personal lives anyway, which is why all those late night talk shows are so generic, and the interactions they have with with them. But people that really are doing a lot of the technical work on films, I think that'd be really interesting. I'm not aware of other podcasts or shows that really feature and talk to those types of folks, and I'm sure they've got loads and loads of interesting stuff to talk about. So that's where we're going to be going here in the fairly near future. As far as movies I watched this week, I've already mentioned Eaten Alive. Well, there's another one. I watched a lot of horror movies, gory horror movies. There's a really funny one on Amazon Prime called I Had a Hell of a Time at House Harker. And it's about these three brothers that essentially had like vampire slayers in their history, family history. And they're about to lose their house, and they create this whole thing where they're going to try to like have like a vampire show. And essentially what happens with the sort of the climax of the movie, you might as well know in order to watch it, is there's a bunch of people inside their house and everyone gets turned into a vampire. And so it's very, very bloody in its last like 20-30 minutes, but really funny. Some of the writing's really good, but this one's super, super low budget. It may not really make it onto any of my recommendations list because I'm not going to recommend it that hard. Like if I were to do a genre list, this one would be ranked at like number 12, 13, 14. So it's not going to make like a top 10 list. So I might as well recommend it here. Crush the Skull is another one. Really funny, not super gory. In fact, not really gory at all. Real mild on any sort of blood or anything. But really funny movie, really well written, super, super low budget on both of these. Both of these are available on Amazon Prime. But Crush the Skull is about some burglars, professional burglars that get into this house. And essentially they get in there and they can't get out. It's all like bulletproof glass, concrete walls, and a serial killer lives in the house and has this whole like underground dungeon, and they have to escape. That's the setup, but really funny writing, really funny jokes, very self-aware, so I really enjoyed that one a lot. I mentioned Shimmer Lake. I watched that earlier this week, and Beyond Skyline, that's really what I watched. Now, one that I watched that I'm never going to recommend, but I might as well talk about it on this show, is Manhunt. Now, it is a John Woo directed Netflix original movie. Man, was this a dumpster fire. John Woo must just be getting up in years. I don't want to rip on him too much, but his mind is not there because like there's close-ups of women's feet for no reason. He's always got to put doves in his freaking movies. And in this one, like they crash, there's like a little car chase and they crash into a hut full of doves in like the middle of a parking lot, and one of the guys tries to throw feed at the other guy as they're fighting, and it's not like, oh, I'm going to throw dove food in your eyes, bird seed in your eyes. It's like a big bin, and he tries to like heave it at him. It's just ridiculous, and you can't follow the story. It's all subtitled, and I'm no noob to watching foreign movies, so I can follow a storyline through subtitles, but this was just impossible to watch. The thing that upsets me about this is Netflix is spending money getting the rights to these movies. Quit it. So much of their Netflix original content is horrible. Don't get this just because it's new, Netflix. Go back. John Woo's got great movies. Hard Boiled is one of his best. Chow Yun-fat, awesome action, bloody, but cool. It's got the doves and stuff in it, but this is back when it was cool. This is in the 90s. This movie looks so cool. I can't find it anywhere. Netflix, you could have spent 1/10 of the money on the rights to that, and it would have been a way better ad to your catalog than Manhunt, which nobody's going to watch again. No, I couldn't get through it, so it'll never make a list for me. I did give it a chance, too. I watched a solid 30-40 minutes of it, almost half of it. It is horrific. So that was my week in movies. Let me know in the comments below which you watched if you're on YouTube. But I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about Deadpool and really what makes it so good, because it is really one of the better, more current comic book movies that's out there. Now, a couple of things to keep in mind, even if you didn't like Deadpool, it's currently the highest grossing rated R movie in history. and it's also the highest grossing X-Men movie in history. And the reason that second one is more significant than the first is because there are, when you count the Wolverine movies, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, not counting Logan. We've got 8, maybe more, but I'm counting 8 X-Men movies that are PG-13, spanning the course of about 15 plus years. They all made a lot of money. The fact that they're PG-13, more people can buy tickets. More people can see them. So PG-13s make more money. Deadpool counts as X-Men because X-Men are in it. When you count it that way, it's still, even at being rated R, made more than all of those movies. There's not one X-Men movie that made more money than Deadpool. So very, very significant milestones. I know the creators knew they had something special. And when I say creators, Ryan Reynolds is one of the creators. He's very, very responsible for not just movie getting made, but also its success. So he's lumped in with the creators. But one of the reasons it's successful is the story is simple. It's not too convoluted. There's a lot of characters, but there's not too many pivotal characters that you're needing to follow their story. There's just ancillary characters. So it's very simple. It's got a simple setup. It's executed. They set up your bad guy, your good guy. Not that I need all my movies to be that simple, but because it is that easy to follow, they're able to have fun in between, and things don't become so convoluted. And a good example of something being convoluted are the Avengers movies. There's so many characters, there's so many storylines going on. It really everything sort of gets kind of flatlined and muddied out, whereas Deadpool, you're able to really kind of focus and kind of focus more on really the struggle he's having with cancer, the struggle he's having leaving his relationship, all of those things. Not as much as in a real drama, but it plays so much better here than it does in most comic book movies, and I really attribute that to them pulling back the reins, keeping it simple. If anything, they went a little over the top with the giant ship turning over. I mean, I like that it's a reference from the Avengers, but everything else leading up to that was so much cooler and more interesting. I mean, him spelling things out with the dead bodies of the guys down on the ground was so much more interesting, even visually, than this giant ship being like slowly overturned and as the climax. You don't need to do that, Deadpool. You know, the action and stuff is way cooler than the huge CGI special effects. That's not really where, that's not the Deadpool's wheelhouse. You're doing everything else so well, so don't focus too much on that. The writing's funny. You know, it's that good banter. Ryan Reynolds is funny. I mean, if you can kind of hate on him for Van Wilder or whatever, but he's good on screen. He's sharp. He's bitey. It's good. So that's great. Similarly, you know, Guardians of the Galaxy, funny. It plays well with that lighter sort of superhero movie versus you know, The Dark Knight, you know, needs really no humor or levity in it. So I like that Marvel has gone in that direction and not tried to just make everything Christopher Nolan-ish, because that is ruining the DC movies. They're doing a terrible job with that. And then the big one for me on this is the rated R action is back. We went a long time. Now, they were making rated R action movies forever, but as far as like the really just good rated R action, it really ended with The Matrix. I mean, those movies were the last really big rated R action movies we had. You know, Die Hard is a good example of one of those classic movies, Predator, all of that. The problem is all of those franchises started going PG-13, and it just really waters it down. You know, you're seeing tons of people get shot and killed, and not that I gotta see the blood for like, because I just need to, but it doesn't make any sense to see a ton of people getting shot with no blood. It's just sort of like, I don't know, it's like you're watching something that's unfinished. Now that we're getting it back, you know, Logan was fantastic from last year. It would not have been rated R had Deadpool not been as successful as it was. So, you know, that's another reason to love Deadpool. I'm just glad we get those movies back. Because again, Predator, RoboCop, there's so many good rated R action movies from the 80s and 90s that are bloody, And that's part of what makes them good, but just the realistic violence is what really makes it good, and I'm glad we're getting back to that. It's really a shame we went so long without it. I did a whole video essay on this once, like, man, it was like a good 10 months ago and nobody watched it, so I'll stop and spare you there. A couple of things I thought that were pretty cool about Deadpool is the taxi driver, Depender, is actually named after a friend of Ryan Reynolds from elementary school. He's put it in an interview as just like a really cool guy who apparently died from a lightning strike. And yeah, that sounds like a joke, but it is not. That's a real thing that happened. So that character is kind of a tribute to just an old friend of his. The B. Arthur shirt, the Golden Girls shirt that he's wearing in the beginning before he becomes Deadpool, they had to pay $10,000 to get the rights to that image for the movie. So that's how movies are so expensive. Apparently, all that money went to charity. But in the Deadpool comics, it's not just like a funny like hipster reference. In the Deadpool comics, Deadpool does have an infatuation with B. Arthur. So that is a reference and not just nothing. And Deadpool, the name Deadpool, we know where it comes from in the movie, but the original creator has actually stated it actually comes from the Deadpool, which is a Dirty Harry movie. And the funny thing about that is that Dirty Harry movie, the Deadpool, Jim Carrey actually stars as the villain. If you've never seen it, check that one out, because that element is really kind of an odd. It's odd to see him as like the bad guy. It's really weird. So, I'll also mention, because I think a lot of people didn't notice this, that Ryan Reynolds has played Deadpool before. So if you remember, if you remember the original X-Men Origins Wolverine, so the first standalone Wolverine movie, the guy he fights at the end is Ryan Reynolds. He's got no shirt and he has no mouth. He like just has skin over his mouth, and he's got two swords that come out of his arms. That was supposed to be Deadpool. They like reinvented him for that movie. What they did though was they robbed him of the one thing that makes him Deadpool, which is his smart mouth. It's the stupidest thing, but luckily what they did in Deadpool is there's a line where he says like, this is where everything started to go sideways. They actually showed that action figure sideways for just a minute, and then it ends up, it's like one of his action figures. So that's kind of a cool reference, but Ryan Reynolds has been a comic book character 5 times. He was Deadpool before, Deadpool now. He was the Green Lantern. He was the Green Lantern. He was Hannibal King. I can't make my fourth finger go up. He was Hannibal King in Blade Trinity, and that is a Marvel character. And then Nick Walker, number 5, in R.I.P.D., which is a Dark Horse Comics franchise. So this is number 5. He said it's going to be his last, but I have a feeling he's going to be doing Deadpool for a while. He hasn't said this is his last Deadpool appearance. He's just said it's his last comic book character, and it should be. He should go out on top. He should do Deadpool as long as he needs to do it. Get out. Be done with that. That is it for Deadpool. So, hopefully, you got something out of that. Hopefully you're excited to see the new movie. I know I'm going to be checking it out. It's going to be probably the one comic book movie I'm most excited about. So I'm hoping it's as good as the original. I know it'll be bigger in a lot of ways. Hopefully that doesn't ruin anything. Let me know in the comments below if you're a Deadpool fan or if this was a complete waste of your time. Let me know also what you're looking forward to seeing. There's a lot of stuff coming out later this week. If you're still watching, listening to this, or listening on a podcast, you can check out the channel. On Wednesday, I'll be putting out a list of the top 10 foreign horror movies you can currently watch on Netflix. I know a lot of you have been wanting to see some of those movies on lists, and I've been holding off to make a comprehensive foreign list. So I'm going to go through that. There's some really great movies on this list. I'm looking at it right now. And then on Friday, I'm going to do something I'm really excited about. I'm going to give you a list of movies that are so bad, they're good. So we're going to talk about movies that are just horrifically bad that are really, really fun to watch. There are millions of really bad movies out there, but there's some gems that are just become good again. I've got a list of 10. All of them are available currently on streaming services. That'll be on Friday. Look forward to that. Next week, I'll be talking about some gory horror movies. And I still got to figure out really what the rest of next week is going to be. So don't forget, let me know about the name in the comments below. I'll be looking for those comments. Let's see, did I have anything else? Oh, yeah, just as I'm signing off here, last week was my first full week to do an episode every day of the week, so 5 business days. I'm doing that again this week. It was harder than I thought it was going to be. I am going to stick with it. One of the cool things was, I know a lot of you saw that video or you listened to it on this uncut version. I told the story of how I met my wife. I essentially framed it around Quentin Tarantino movies and how each one sort of had an impact on me at different stages in my life. And then ultimately 4 Rooms led to me meeting my wife. Well, I watched that video with her Friday night. She got misty-eyed. She didn't know where the story was going because it was a while before I kind of got around to meeting her, at the end of the story. But she was very happy with that. It was basically like an early Mother's Day thing. So thanks for all your kind comments on that one. Again, a lot of love in the comments section. You guys are great. I do not want to do Darren Reed's mean comments. Everybody likes to do that format. But I do kind of want to pick one of the week. I kind of want to highlight one. I've stopped responding to them, like I said, because people that make the mean comments, they don't get it when I kind of joke back with them. They're just, I don't know. They're a certain breed of person that just sort of leaves a snarky mean comment in the YouTube's comments. But I'd like to kind of highlight one and talk about it every week. There's one that has been bugging me for weeks. And I really don't let them get under my skin, which is one of the benefits of doing this channel. Is at first, the first couple I got really got under my skin. I mean, really bothered me for a while. Now, I've really learned what kind of person does that, and it doesn't bother me at all. But there's one, I made a comment about the new DC movies, the Justice League and Batman vs. Superman not being good, not making sense, whatever. And if you've been following me for a while, you know I know movies. Even if we don't have the same taste on everything, I understand movies, how they're made, what makes them work, what makes them don't work. If you're new, you maybe don't have an appreciation for that just yet. Most of you should at this point. But someone commented, they're like, there's nothing wrong with Batman vs. Superman. You just have to know how to follow a story. And for some reason, that little comment has just gotten under my skin because that movie does not tell a story well. It jumps around. You're not invested in why certain people care about certain things. You don't know why someone's upset. It doesn't establish any important elements, really. It kind of establishes some major sweeping things. We don't know why Batman just suddenly kills everybody, when the long history of Batman is that he doesn't kill anybody. And you're like, well, I don't remember him killing everybody. Go back and watch the scene where he takes a Batmobile and just tears through this warehouse district. He's running over everybody. He's murking out everybody. He's got cannons on his car, which Batman doesn't use guns. His car shoots cannons. The body count off Batman in that movie is so high. We have no idea why. It's because it looks cool. It's because Zack Snyder does whatever he wants to do and makes shit look cool. And it does look cool. It looks like a badass music video. And another thing with these DC movies, even with Wonder Woman, which I liked Wonder Woman, there's someone pulling the strings on these things where the climax has to be, they're always surrounded in fire. The sky's tinted like an orangish red on the climax of every single one. They all had the same color palette, and there's fire and there's embers floating. Every single one. What are they doing? Why do they all look the same? Anyway, these movies are not good. You might like them, that's fine. If you like the aesthetic, you like the way Batman looks, you like some of the action in it, you like the special effects, that's all fine. But that doesn't make a good movie. and these movies aren't good. And it doesn't bother me that someone had a different opinion, that they thought it was good, is that they had the gall to go, you just have to know how to follow a story. There's so many things wrong with the storytelling in Batman vs. Superman, just from a writing perspective. I even now that I'm getting heated over it, and let's be real, I'm really not that upset about it, but good fucking God. You know, So anyway, obviously, I'm a little sensitive to that. I'm sure there won't be any comments about how good those movies are in this. And another reason I'm passionate about it, by the way, is I love Batman. I really like everything about Batman, and they kind of rob you of everything that's good about Batman in the new movies. It's just not working for me. I think it's a shame. You know, Warner Brothers is going to want to do Batman movies ongoing at any given time, but we're kind of robbed during this period, during this Zack Snyder period, of getting good quality Batman stuff, and I think that's a shame. I wish we were getting something better out of it. We've seen it done well a couple of times, and it seems like every time they do it right, they immediately follow it up with horse shit. And trust me, the Zack Snyder Batman movies will be looked at as dog shit years from now. When Batman Forever and Batman and Robin came out, people didn't really realize. I think people knew Batman and Robin wasn't good, but no one really knew how horrible that movie is. That movie would have made it onto my upcoming so bad it's good list, but it's not available on any streaming services at the moment, and that's what I want to recommend to you folks. But that movie will make it on a similar list like that. It is laughably bad. But I'll digress. I'll back off of Zack Snyder. His movies look cool at least, but maybe he should be a production designer and not a freaking director. Somebody will figure it out one day. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to support the show, you can go to Patreon. Most of my patrons submit $1 a month, which is fantastic. I don't expect any more. I'm not going to be giving you anything really in return, except for one thing, and then I'll leave you with this. I want to share music on the channel. You can't do that on YouTube. Copyright, that's fine, I get it. I only want to do it from a sharing perspective, but they can't open it up to, they open that door and then people will be using it creatively, and can't do it. I can use it in a podcast, and I'm going to be making some Spotify playlists that I'm going to be sharing. I'm going to start off sharing that with my patrons, see how that goes. So patrons only will get some exclusive Flick Connection playlist. There'll be playlist of things similar to things in movies. One rotating one that'll just be stuff I'm listening to now. Similarly to how most of you seem to like my recommendations in movies, I get comments from friends all the time. They're always looking for music recommendations. I've always got something you've never heard, so that should be interesting to see me introduce a little bit of music as well. Speaking of music, I'm going to leave you with a tune, the same tune that introed me. It's a original piece by my best friend Andrew, who made it for the show. He made me something with this cool Tarantino vibe. Really appreciate it. He's making some more stuff for the channel, so I'm very excited about that. And just for you close followers, he is one of the friends that went to go see Kill Bill with me in that story. So he was there. He's shared some movie milestones with me over the years. He's contributing to the channel. So big thanks to Andrew for the tunes. But I'll keep making this show as long as you keep watching it. Thanks for watching number 2, and you will see me next time.